Well, hi everyone, welcome. This is the BBCRM Power BI Skills Lab, so hopefully you are in the right place. I am the session host for today, Kelly Flanagan, and I'm joined with Rebecca Sundquist, who will be leading the session.
So on the right-hand side, this is what will walk you through how to get access to the Power BI workspace that we've provided to you. So our end goal is to get you into this space where you're going to see a report called Sample Report Built Online. And in order to get there, we've added your organization's email address as a guest user in our Power BI tenant. So let me first of all drop into the chat this link to the PDF that I have up here so that you've got that at your fingertips. Don't have to just rely on following along my screen. But then for a quick link, I'll also drop this URL in because that's the first step. Click on this URL, and when you're asked to authenticate, please use your organization's authentication to your organization email address. So you may have to go through your organization's sign-in page or your organization's two-factor authentication. Go ahead and walk through that. And after you have authenticated in your traditional way of authenticating at your org, you'll see that Blackbaud is asking for permission to sign you in. So you'll want to accept that. And then furthermore, Blackbaud's going to take a next step to ask you to set up multi-factor authentication here as well, because we really are stepping out on a limb here to invite you into our system as guests. And so we're going to ask you to set up that additional level of multi-factor authentication. Microsoft Authenticator is going to be the default option that's provided to you. So if you already have that installed on your phone, you'll be scanning that QR code and just adding in this guest account as an additional authenticator account. At that point, you're able to sign on in, and you should be at our screen by then. Now, there are other options as well if you do get to this screen and it says, I want to use another app. You can walk through that as well. So please use the raise hand feature once you are in and you're able to see this screen here. I anticipate there may be some hiccups or issues along the way. We might not get 100% in here, but I hope that everyone in the Skills Lab is able to at least follow along with my demonstration and get some value today. The next thing that I'll mention is this is a bring your own license environment to Power BI. So once we get to this screen and you click on the sample report, which is the first step you'll take here, that's when Microsoft will be checking your account to make sure that your organization has provided you with a user license at the Pro or Premium level for Power BI. And if that's not the case, then you should be added into the free 60-day trial of the Premium level license, and you'll be able to participate in the Skills Lab and continue with us. If you have already expired your trial for your organization account, then that will be a stopping point for you, and you'll get to sit back and watch and participate in the chat, but you won't have that license to continue with us. So we're learning about those licensing tricks along the way here as well. So I know that we've got people here who are brand new to Power BI, and you're here to explore and see what does the end product look like? Is it something that makes sense for your organization? And then we've got people with a little bit more experience who want to know some more details about specifically connecting to BBCRM. And so as we walk through this, our new users, please don't feel lost. Just keep in mind what your purpose is to be here today. I'm going to show you how you can access the different visualizations and just experiment with them. And if you're going your own way and experimenting in those visualizations while I start talking to some experts about the modeling, but under the hood there, stay in your zone and stay engaged with us. And today I'm not going to open up Power BI Desktop. We're going to stay in the workspace online. Let's go ahead and click in to the sample report built online. I'm going to provide a little overview of what this report is. This is the report that we're going to kind of mock up together today. And we're going to start with the year-to-date, year-over-year view. This view here lets us monitor the current or the fiscal year that we choose is in the foreground on these gauges compared to the same time period of the prior year. We hover over this, we get some tooltips to tell us that as of 6/1 in fiscal year 2020, we were 80% behind target. All right, so that's what we're reading there. We can change this to look at the current fiscal year and see that, well, the current year is way above target. But if we hover, you can see this point is fiscal year 2018. We also have the feature, I'm turning on a drill down, I'm showing you that this is how we enter into drill mode, so that if I click on 2018, then I see these details. But I'm going to scroll back up again. Just giving you a little orientation, we're going to build this view in just a minute. We're also going to build a view that's focused specifically on asks that have been made. And so these asks are listed out by their ask year. And we see that 8 asks were made in fiscal year 2021 and have been accepted at some point since that ask date. We've got the ability to choose how many years we're looking at and to filter by plan type. So, for example, we'll build that out. And oh yeah, the other feature that I want to show off that we're going to walk through, because I know it's really critical for your user experience, is the ability to drill through. So for these 3 accepted asks in fiscal year 2021 that are in the major giving type that we filtered above, let's go see those solicitation details. Okay, sorry, pardon me, it must have been just one. Here are our details, and we'll also walk through how to include this link that lets us get into the system. Now, of course, you guys aren't going to have access to my demo database. This is where your guest access stops, and you won't be able to get to this screen, but you will be able to see how that URL is set up as a link. We'll walk through that so that you can push your users into CRM to take the actions that they see are necessary based on what they're doing in that reporting. All right, so those of you who are following along with me, you need to have this report open. It doesn't matter what tab you're on at this point or what page of that report, but we need to click on the link that says BB Dev Days, Skills Lab BBCRM Power BI in the top. This is the name of the workspace that we've invited you to as guests. So when we go into the workspace itself, now we have access to the data set. Let's go ahead and open up these options. So I'll talk a little bit about the level of access that's been provided here. So you might be in an organization where your developers have control over the data set and are publishing a data set that subsequent report builders can consume and build on. And that's the environment that I'm mimicking here for you, where I'm the developer, I created the data set, and I've published it here. I'm not logged in with my developer credentials, I'm actually logged in with guest credentials, just as you have. And I've given all of you contributor access to this workspace. So you're going to be experiencing what it's like to be a workspace contributor in Power BI. So you have the ability to analyze this data set that I've published for you in Excel, create a report. That's what we're getting ready to do. That's what we're going to click next. If you have a pro user license, a premium feature, creating a paginated report is a premium feature, as opposed to a pro Power BI Pro level feature. Get Quick Insights is one of those artificial intelligence features that I encourage you to come back and play with later. One thing I haven't mentioned yet is that this workspace is going to remain available to you all of next week through the end of Friday. So you're invited to come back and continue to explore. Come back and click on Get Quick Insights and see what that does for you. I'm sure that it would be much more interesting on your data than on our demo data set. And that's all that I'm going to cover here. So you can see I'm skipping over download. Yes, you have the ability to download the workbook here, and those of you who are more advanced users might choose to do that. I'm not here to tell you about how to adjust those parameters to fit your data set, but I'll just give you the hint that the server name and the database name are in parameters, and the links to pages are determined by parameters as well. So that might be enough hint to get our experts a little bit deeper access. Today we're here to talk at the surface level how to create a report in Power BI. We're going to 100% stay in the browser here. We're going to start, let me get back to the view that we're going to mock up. We're going to start with our year-over-year view. So we've got 3 gauges, we've got a slicer, and that view across the bottom. We're going to start with the title, everyone. I'm entering a text box from the menu bar up here, and we're talking about opportunities, year to date, year over year. And here, let me show you that you've got access to all of your fields that are available. We can reference one that I called through date. We see that result 6/1. Yes, indeed, I have data through 6/1. My through date, you might choose to another method to identify your through date. Here, I'm looking at the maximum date that any steps were added to the interactions table for this prospect context. And that's just because if I found this certainly in a development environment when I've got a copy of a database and my actual date today is 3 months after the last time that copy was refreshed, I need to get back to that point in time that the data is really relevant to. And so that's why I created the through date in the way I did, but you could always use today as well for that. And we know we want 3 gauges. So here's the visualization area. And my new Power BI users, this is what you want to become familiar with. This is where you want to explore. You might be spending some time in here today and coming back later. We're going to pick out the gauge visualization, make this a nice little square. And let's see, maybe a little smaller. I'm going to Control C, Control V, and just put 3 of these out here. I'm going to continue with my page layout by moving on to my line chart and filling up the space at the bottom here. And we're going to start with the line chart because that gives us a full view of the time period and everything like that. We know we're interested in seeing the time across the bottom. So I've expanded the dim date for my date dimension, and I'm adding in the fiscal year hierarchy. So nothing's showing up yet, but notice what happened when I did click on the fiscal year because I have this visualization activated. In my Fields tab, the fiscal year hierarchy was added to the axis. Now I want to add some data to the values. I'm going to be comparing expected ask amount, and accepted amount over time. So let me go down to my opportunity view. And I have these 3 little folders that are exactly what I need for my expected and ask and accepted. So notice that as the data modeler, I chose to group these measures together because all of them are routing through a specific date in their relationship to that date dimension. And they're using the relationship of expected ask date to the date dimension or using the relationship of the ask date. So what that means is when I put expected ask amount across the date dimension, it's telling me what is the expected ask amount for expected ask dates in that period. Now I'm going to put ask amount across there. This is the ask amount for ask dates in that period. And then accepted is the accepted amount for response dates in that period. So keep in mind that an individual opportunity might have an expected ask date and an ask date and a response date all in different periods. And so the revenue is following those specific dates as opposed to one date value representing the entire opportunity. So this is then going to allow us to do a comparison. We've got our year to date, year over year. So since we've labeled this whole view to say this is a year-to-date page, we need to add a filter on this page that is focused on year-to-date. Now, there are different ways for you to do this. So I'll acknowledge you could also have separate measures that are written to focus on a year-to-date period. And when you're asking the internet, you'll find a lot of options for that. I chose to create an is year-to-date filter, which I can add to the page. And so that filter is referencing this through date. And I wanted to give myself a lot of flexibility for what I might put into that through date. And this is the reason that my is year to date flag is a calculated column that references the through date. If your through date is always going to be really consistent, then I'd recommend you calculate that column earlier in the modeling process using the Power Query to kind of write that query. Yeah, so my mind is all down in Power Query at this point, and we need to bring it back up high level. I just know that there will be a lot of questions from our attendees today about calculated columns and whether to create them in the query or in DAX, and there's certainly a lot of material online debating the merits of each. Our point here today is that I found it very easy to use this flag of year to date and just apply it to the entire page. So it says filters on this page. Note that if I click on the visual, then I've got the option to add filters on this visual, but this filter is on the whole page. So I'm not going to have to worry about my year to date again. What I might do is go into the formatting for this visual and update my title to specify that this is a year to date view. Right, and we'll be updating that title text again and using this formatting to help our users just get an experience for how you can customize how the material presents to your end users. All right, let's get our ask amount in here, or we're starting with expected ask amount. Expected ask amount is going to be in the foreground, and so I just highlighted my gauge. I clicked on expected ask amount. It was automatically added to the value. Next, I want to add to the target value. So let's go click on expected ask amount prior year. This one is using a same period last year function to calculate. And well, that looks funny, right? That's because the expected ask amount prior year was added to this minimum value. We want to add it to the target value, so we just move it. Now, well, it still looks funny because we haven't told it yet what fiscal year we're interested in. So we're going to get to that. We're going to provide a slicer so that our end users can choose the fiscal year. And we could, fix it on the current fiscal year by using a relative date. But I do want to give our users the option to kind of page back through time. Before we do that, while we're still on this view, let's add to the tooltips this expected amount % difference. And also to the tooltips, I'm going to scroll up and add the dim date for the fiscal year so that this displays when we hover. Well, it says my fiscal year is 1960, and that's just because we haven't yet filtered this to any specific year, and it's showing us the first fiscal year. Let's add the slicer now. So a slicer is a visualization, and your end users, who aren't the consumers of these reports, they're not likely to know the technical term slicer versus filter. But in Power BI as a report builder, it's important to understand a slicer is a visualization that impacts subsequent visualizations, and a filter is something underlying the visualization, underlying the page, or underlying all pages. For this slicer, we want fiscal year. So I'm just clicking on fiscal year. It's added to the field for that slicer. And we can scroll down and find 2021. There we go. But this is not the user experience that we want. So also note right here, if I hold control, I can select multiple years. So first of all, I don't want multiple years in here, so that shouldn't be an option. We need to change it to single select. Secondly, I don't want it filtering my line graph below. And third, I don't want to have to scroll past all these years that are meaningless. We're going to solve those problems now. Let's start with the single select. And this is one of the formatting options. So I'm clicking on Format, and Selection Controls turn single select on. Okay. So it's important to know that your slicers have a lot of formatting options. Selection Controls is one of them. You might think that Selection Controls would be the great place to choose between list and dropdown, but actually that's over here on the viz. So now we go back to our viz and we find that little dropdown in the right-hand corner, and we can choose between list or dropdown. I like dropdown, that sounds great. But 1960 is the first year that shows up. Not helpful. I don't actually have data there. That just happens to be what my date dimension is covering, because I was just a little bit lazy when I created it and didn't necessarily tie it. It wasn't lazy. I created a template so that it can apply to any client can change the date. But, we are getting ready to filter our slicer. And so again, this is where that concept of slicers filter the views, but also filters can filter the slicer is important to understand. I'm going to use the date out of dim date and pop it into the filters on this visual, the slicer, and use the relative date option. So I want to look at dates, and today we're gonna use the today option when we're talking about relative dates. Where the dim dates date is in the last 5 years, then include that fiscal year value in my slicer. Now let's see what we have over here. A much shorter list, and there we are. We're ready to go. We've got fiscal year 2021. We still have the problem of our line graph disappeared. Let me draw your attention to visual interactions on the menu bar across the top. So a little hidden feature, but ready for you to use. We're going to turn on edit interactions from that visual interactions. Now we have our fiscal year slicers highlighted, and we're looking at how it impacts subsequent views. It's filtering, 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 filtering. Oh, don't want to filter the line chart, so we say none, and that's good. Now that we have this concept of how visuals can filter each other, the slicer is not the only visual that has filter capabilities across the others. If I click on fiscal year 2018, I have now filtered these other views, and I do not actually want to filter my slicer or any of my gauges by my line chart. So I turn that filtering capability off, and now we're done editing the interactions. Those little pop-ups go away. So
quick question, Rebecca, that
yeah.
came in, I think, when you're showing the date slicer. Is it possible to show the date slicer as a date picker as opposed to the dropdown? Do you know if that's available?
I'm hoping I will have time to demonstrate a range, a between range. And when we get into, yeah, so I'm sorry, my mind just paused because like, are we talking about on the slicer or on the filter? So I'm just going to encourage our users to experiment with that on your own, but I will show you that there are different options when we're using a numeric data type instead of this text data type. All right, so I do need to pick up the pace a little bit to get to one of the key features that I wanted to show. So I'm not going to build out those other views. I am going to show you that you can format the title. This title, of course, is much too long, and so I'm gonna shorten it down. When you're formatting, you can choose your alignment. You can color and size as needed. There is one other thing that bothers me about the gauge. And if I'm a report builder who doesn't have access to the data model, then I'm going to actually give up on using gauges at this point. I'm going to go into this option to get more visuals. I'm going to go get a bullet chart. Or I might just settle, if that's even too much work, just settle for doing a bar that compares this year to last year. Because I don't like this meaningless white space in the gauge. This value of 469 doesn't come from anywhere. It's just simply twice where we landed. And when we do, if you later take the time to build out the subsequent gauges here, you'll see that they're all following this pattern, which makes you think that 235 mil has something to do with whatever other number shows up, because they're the same place on the rainbow. They must be comparable somehow, but that's not the case. So really setting this maximum value is something that you want to take control of. And if you do have access to the data model, you're able to do that. So I've done that here. Let's go ahead and get that expected gauge, expected max, or max expected amount. I'm going to put this maximum value in here. And I chose, let's back it up a year because it's going to make more sense when we're not quite to target. I chose to always put the target at the top as long as the actual value is less than 2 times the target. So what we've got here is take the target times 2, and as long as this value is less than that max, then we'll see its progress towards that target. Now this makes a lot more sense. We're 80% away from the target. That's meaningful. I can see that we've shaded 20% of this half of the arch. But then if we do extend past the target, then the metric that I built in has an if statement that says then show the total amount that came in. So gauges are funny like that, and I intentionally wanted to kind of trip over those with you today because they're so popular. Your executive wants to see a dashboard with a gauge. But you also have those other options to explore visuals. Type in bullet chart to try that one out as an alternative for this type of metric. I do want to move on to the next step here. So we're going to add a new page. Now the next page is about focusing on asks. We're going to start with the stacked bar chart, and we'll get to this filter view here. I'm not in edit mode there, so we're gonna do it all in edit mode so you can see what we can build out. We'll start with our title, solicitations. Of course, you can add that value in there for the date. I'm going to also show you the card visual, which is just a nice, simple value. The value we want to show is that through date again. So let's go up to our date dimension, pull in through date. There it is. It's so big. I want it to fit in that amount of space, so let's format it. It's the data label that's too big. We'll just go ahead and change that value. Now I realize some of you might be on a small screen and you might have liked it at font 45, but we've got a few more things to fit on here. We're going to be focusing on that stacked bar chart, or stacked column chart. And again, across the bottom, we're going to put the fiscal year hierarchy. And we're counting asks this time. So we're going to count our asks by ask date. That says that use the ask date when you're relating to that fiscal year hierarchy. And I want to see these by status. So just clicking on status automatically added that to the legend. And now we're going to go answer that question about different slicers. Okay, common mistake, and you guys might have already made it a few times here. I had my visual highlighted when I clicked on the slicer, so I changed my visual type. I'm going to use Control Z, back it up, click off of that page, add my slicer in. So I hope that hasn't been frustrating my users who've been working along with us here. But it will also be very helpful for those of you who just want to see what this looks like as you can kind of navigate through those different visualizations. What does it mean there? You can click through them without changing your data that you've already selected. All right, we're working on the fiscal year. Now, I told you already that using the fiscal year itself is a text field, and we're going to use a numeric field. We know we want to do like 2017 to 2021. I can't remember if this is always going to show up as a between. I feel like it doesn't necessarily. So you need to be aware that the option to get the between range here is a drop down. But now I'm not a big fan of the slider. I don't think my users really need to try to, use that fine motor control to slide things around. They can just type their values. So I have the option to turn the slider off. So let's just format, turn the slider off. And in fact, I don't like the way that the header's complaining, so I turn the header off, I turn the title on. I get more control now. Just call it fiscal year instead of fiscal year number. And you can see that we've impacted our view here. The next thing that I really wanted to showcase is the drill through to a subsequent view. And you saw in our sample report, we drilled through to a third page. Here, let's start by building that view out on this page, and then we'll move it to the third page when we're satisfied with how the visuals on this page filter the records. So we want to see the specific asks that have been made. And I'll tell you, we also want to include that link back to CRM. And I've put that URL into a field that's called opportunity page with this little pointer. Oh, that's beautiful. Yeah, we got a URL. Does it work? Indeed, indeed, it works. Let's get us logged in over here. We can see those details, but of course we don't want to display it this way. Let me show you the trick in our visual. We go to our formatting, and under values, we want to display this as a URL icon instead. That's much more concise. And now it's important to mention that we have a level of granularity here that is one record per GUID for our opportunity, because each page is, of course, unique by the GUID of the opportunity record ID. So we know that's what we want, because that's really what we want to do, is now push our users back into CRM. We can add some other details here, and I encourage you to get creative and choose what you want to show on your detail list. I'm putting in the constituent name, the primary plan manager. And if we had another hour, I would love to talk with you about the documentation that should underlie this to support your end users, the fact that Power BI does let you put descriptions on every table header and field name. Now, I haven't put that level of detail in here, so I apologize to my guests as you're operating in this model with no documentation. All right, the next thing is opportunity status. That's going to be important. All right, so let's see what we've got. In fiscal year 2021, 8 asks were made that are in the accepted status now. Let's click on that and see if we get 8 records. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. All right, guys, is that for real? Let's add opportunity count on here just to check. All right, 10 records. So I'm really curious if anyone has noticed what mistake I made here. And sorry if my screen goes funky as I'm trying to hop into chat to see what folks might have to say. My opportunity count is 10. Let me give you another hint. My ask count is 8. All right, so here Helen is the manager on Tim's opportunity, and that does not count as an ask in fiscal year 2021. Well, why is that? Let's check out the ask date. I have my ask date in my vQuery opportunity here. There it is. And now let's see what other dates are available. We've got a response date. So this is a case where Tim responded in fiscal year 2021 to an ask that was made in fiscal year 2020. If we hover over 2020, we see there's 6 asks in this accepted state. And indeed, Tim is one of them. Tim is one of those accepted asks. But if I didn't have my ask count here, then I only see 4 records. And indeed, we're not going to put opportunity count and ask count in here in our final view. We just give me the details. So your end users are going to start getting real confused here at this point, right? The issue is in the role-playing dimensions. So Kelly, if you're able, can you pop in the URL link to Microsoft's documentation on role-playing dimensions? Because there are 2 ways to go about managing the roles of dates in the different imports that you've set up here. So rather than using this date dimension that has a active relationship to the opportunities on what's called opportunity date, we need to make sure that we're using the actual ask date across the board on this entire visualization. And this is a very easy fix to put in place right here. So notice I've already created a table that is called ask date, and this is a copy of dim date. So when you're creating this back in your modeling, you simply say calculate a table and ask date equals dim date. Now you have a copy of dim date that you're ready to relate in a new, fresh way to your dimensions, or pardon me, your facts. So we relate ask date to the ask date on opportunity. And now in our ask count by fiscal year and opportunity status, our values, we're going to clear out this fiscal hierarchy and put in our ask fiscal hierarchy. You see it says ask fiscal year now. Let's get a little more space here. I'm too crowded. Now you're fine. All right, and if we click on fiscal year 2021, we expect to see 8 asks. Now our opportunity count is 8. Perfect. Now we expect to see 6 opportunities with an ask date in fiscal year 2020. And yes, indeed, we've got Tim showing up in 2020 based on the ask date and not showing up in 2021, though he had a response in 2021. Now remember, we've also got this fiscal year over here that we need to update. So we're going to just simply swap out ask fiscal year number. And all right, we'll get you updated again, 2017 to 2021. There we go. Our view's ready to go. Doing a time check to see if I have enough time just to show you that beautiful filter across the top. If you haven't figured that one out yet, let me walk you through adding the prospect plan type, which is under our prospect table. Nope, not our prospect. Pardon me. Prospect plan type. It's under our prospect plan table. Plan type. All right, we've just added a table in here. Now tables, we can see that they're filtering the other views as well. They can also act as slicers. There we go, slice. But that's not the visual we want to see. We're going to switch this over to a slicer visual, and under formatting, you have the option formatting, general, orientation. We want horizontal. You can actually make a cute little grid or put a horizontal view in here, and it's under items that you can control the colors. So make it pretty. Choose what kind of style of outline you want to see. And now we've got a slicer that filters the entire view. All right, so for major giving, we've got 1 ask count that's accepted, and there's Rita. We saw her earlier. We're ready to work on drill throughs. We're going to create page 3. And on page 3, we want to paste in our table from here. So I'm doing Control X on my table and dropping it into page 3, sizing it up. And I'm going to leave it up to you on your own time to prettify the table, choose what you want in there. Right now, I've got my link, and that's my main goal. The trouble is, these 2 pages are not yet linked. I'm hovering over this, I'm right-clicking, I'm not getting the option to drill through. Drill down is talking about these features up here, drilling down in the year. I'm not getting the option to drill through. So go back to page 3, and we consider what should trigger a source view to drill through to this destination. And we've got the drill through list over here, ready to receive some fields. We know that opportunity status is something important to us on our view that we want to trigger drill throughs, and also maybe fiscal years. But remember, it was asked, right? That ask fiscal year and ask fiscal month. Go ahead and throw them in. Really, we would have been fine just throwing opportunity status on there. And I'll explain why. Just a sec. Let's go back over to page 2 and see if adding those drill throughs, which say, if the source page has any of these fields and we're hovering over them, then allow right click to drill through. And there it is. Drill through to page 3. And then we've got our 8 records. We're ready to click on these links to go back into CRM, start taking actions. The second thing I wanted to mention is that we kept this feature called Keep All Filters on. That means all filters from the source page have been passed over, including plan type. So let's come back, focus on major giving. Now we should only see Rita. Right click to drill through. Here we go. That plan type is major giving, came through because we have keep all filters on. So you have that control as well. And I felt that this was a really important user feature to walk you through so that you can see how to most effectively, get down to the details and then get back into CRM to continue working. All right. So we're doing pretty well on time here. Kelly, have there been any other questions that I should take a second at this point?
Nothing in the chat, unless anyone wants to throw something in there very quickly now, but I think you're good to keep on going, Rebecca.
Okay, because what I wanted to talk about next is some of the artificial intelligence features. So, folks, we have given you this access to our workspace, to a model that's already been developed for you on the prospect functional area so that you can really explore the features here. And I do hope that you'll be coming back. You know what? Let me just show you right now that we can save this report. You can save the report that you're working on right now. This is the actual Blackbaud demo. You might need to, put your name after it or something so that it is a unique name, because we can't have reports of the same name out here, but save your work and come on back into it later today or next week. All right, so my report's been saved and I'm ready to go back in and edit it some more. I think I can edit my report. Let's get back up to the front page here. Blackbaud demo. Blackbaud demo. All right, guys. Can I not edit my own report? So I didn't actually walk through saving and then attempting to edit later as a user with the contributor status. So I think we're learning something today about my guests that have contributor status in the workspace. You're able to create a report, but good luck after that. Sorry, guys. Feel free to create as many as you need to do your learning. I'm not finding an edit feature. When I am logged in as a fully featured member of the workspace, that's when I am able to edit an existing report. I thought that as a contributor, I'd still be able to edit the reports that I create and just not maybe reports that others create, but I am still getting used to this myself. And I think that Kelly shared out earlier a link that talks about workspace sharing, and hopefully that has some of these details in there for us. All right, folks, I'm just going to start a new one, create a report. Because I want to bring your attention to a visualization that's called key influencers. This is so easy to build out that you've got to do at least one of them and hopefully fall in love. So key influencers, we need to choose what we want to analyze, what influences, and our go-to here is what influences opportunity status to be accepted. So let's go find opportunity status, put it on what we're analyzing. All right, what influences opportunity status to be unqualified? No, not interested in that. Accepted. But you can see that those end users of your report have access to choose what they're analyzing within that dimension. And now we need to choose what we're going to explain by. So I'm just curious, not that I would use this in a statistical manner to actually make predictions, but how well are our users aligning the likelihood type code with the actual acceptance? Are they well aligned? And indeed they are. So when the likelihood type code is high, those opportunities are 54 times more likely to be accepted than opportunities with a lower likelihood, or on average. And there are 92 opportunities that had a high likelihood type code. Now, like I said, this isn't something that I actually want to use to explain why opportunity status is accepted. Let's keep going and add in our opportunity type. And I'm curious if we can add our prospect plan type while we're here. I am curious if my primary plan manager plays a role. Do I have some exceptional performers? And indeed, Barb Jones is doing amazing as a prospect plan manager. 54 of the asks under Barb Jones plans, no, 54 asks are under Barb Jones plans and 68% of them have been accepted. So that is good news. In fact, I didn't actually filter. I could filter here to make sure that we're looking at asks that have been made, that we've got an ask date on here. So that's, a little tweak that you can add to make things a little bit more accurate, even if when we want to identify what's been accepted, we would have to first verify that they've been asked. All right, but we do have constituent in here, and that's where we're going to find all the interesting stuff about our people, right? Age, has a web address, constituent type, individual versus org. What about these do not mail, do not phone, gender, gives anonymously. Throw in industry code or job title, marital status, and title codes. Let that run, see what we get out of here. Might have clicked a little too fast. Analysis doesn't usually take too long here. Now, if you're in here and you're querying around and you see prospect plan site or site and you're like, oh, that sounds great, you are going to get an error message there. So since I anticipate that you guys are going to explore on your own, I want to go ahead and address that. The site is a many-to-one relationship with plans, and so that's not going to qualify for the key influencers view as an explain field. All right, Barb is still one of our most influential factors, but gives anonymously is also playing a role here, 23 times more likely to be accepted when the constituent is one who gives anonymously. Let me also point out the top segments because, wait, there's more. In our demo data, only one segment really pops, but when we click into it, we see that it's made up of 178 opportunities and almost 50% of those opportunities have been accepted. And we can learn more about the segment to find out what sets it apart from the rest of the universe of opportunities. So we're watching this accepted column to see what's more likely to be accepted out of this here. So the plan type of plan giving, more likely to be accepted. That type of information is available. So it's very fun to explore. It's not where I wanted to even stop today. We also have ask a question as a visualization that you can pop in here. And it gives you some suggestions about how to format that question and then ask away. While we're on this visualizations view, and because I want to make sure that I allow plenty of time for conversation, I'll point out the Get More Visuals. And there is another feature that was recently released that lets you integrate with Power Automate. So in my meeting yesterday, I only just dropped it in the chat at the very last minute because it is a very new feature that is in the preview phase right now with Power BI. But you can add that to your visuals right now. And in our lightning round session that's coming up right after this session, you're going to see a 5-minute video from Kelly where she demonstrates integrating Power Automate with a flow that you've developed so that you can take your work from Power BI to identify records and pass those records to a flow. So this Power Automate feature, I certainly wanted to point it out. You won't be able to play with it here in my workspace, but maybe you've got your own workspace that you can start exploring that feature with. All right, guys, I did want to mention one more detail about the artificial intelligence here. So we talked about very briefly, if you'll remember at the beginning, I mentioned you can get quick insights. We talked about key influencers and then ask a question as a view. I used that view to come up with some questions that I want my users to be asking of the data. And I've clicked now into a dashboard. This is where when you come up with what questions you want your users to ask in the Ask a Question feature, they show up in the dashboard's Ask a Question feature, which is slightly different from the visual. So throwing out the words ask a question to my audience here and then only showing you the visual side isn't the full story of the ask a question feature. It's also available and very powerful on the dashboard side. So these are some questions that I actually wrote that I attached to the data set in the settings of the Power BI service. And that's not part of what my session today, but I do want to just kind of at this point do a broad overview of what's out there. So, this question that I pre-wrote is who are the top step owners for the past year? We've got a lot of unassigned steps. That might be a problem, but then we can see some of those main names. So I'm going to wind it down here and open up to chatting. If you guys want to ask a question verbally, go ahead. Let's clear all of the raise hands. I don't know if I can clear them. Maybe
I already did.
You already did?
Yeah.
Great.
Should be good.
So feel free to raise a hand, or I think you have control to unmute yourself as well. I see that question about a visual, so kind of looking for a mapping of the ecosystem. No, I don't, because it may vary. So I don't have a visual that I can throw out now that kind of shows that ecosystem relationship. Good point. You know what? There is the lineage view that I think is worth mentioning. If we get back in here, and I have the view lineage. So Power BI actually puts this visual together for us.
And you may have to reshare your screen, Rebecca, because I had stolen the view from you for a second.
Let me reshare. So great question, and I had intended to include the lineage view in this demo today. Let me walk back to how I got here. So from my data set, I said view lineage. It was the last option. And when we were talking about this earlier, I stopped short before we got to that option. This is the data set, and it is using data from a gateway. So my gateway stores my credentials and manages the connection through which each scheduled import is running. Scheduled or ad hoc, the import runs through the gateway. And then we've got our data set populated, and all of these reports are dependent on that now. And I have also built a dashboard that references this one report, views from that one report. So I hope that you find that helpful.
But thanks to everyone for joining. Sorry to those of you who did have access issues. We'll follow up with the recording or more information for those of you who weren't able to fully participate, but hopefully you were able to follow along. And thank you, Rebecca, so much for taking the time and walking us through that. It was really interesting and saw some really cool tricks there.